How much influence does Israel have on our country?
Israel's controlling our government.
Israel controls us.
The government of Israel controls the United States.
Israel is in control of our government.
Israel controls America.
There's no easy way to say this other than the United States is being controlled by Israel.
The man controlling our military, Benjamin Netanyahu.
It feels like we're just owned by Israel, and we just never knew it.
Is this being done for America or for Israel?
Israel is losing support here in the United States.
Why do you think AIPAC is buying out U.S. politicians, and what exactly are they buying?
They're buying allegiance.
Never taken money from the Israel lobby, have you?
Taken money from the Israel...
From AIPAC.
You take AIPAC money, don't you?
We're not going to vote for anybody who takes AIPAC money.
I will not vote for a candidate that takes $1 from AIPAC.
It's interesting. I mean, it's interesting.
I will not vote for a candidate that takes AIPAC money.
I will not vote for any politician that takes any money from the Israel lobby.
We don't want candidates who are taking money from AIPAC.
Yeah. Will you be taking money from AIPAC?
No, I will not be accepting money from AIPAC.
AIPAC, I'm coming to tear your kingdom down!
Do you think AIPAC should register as a foreign lobby?
Start listening to the American people and not to AIPAC.
Who do you think we're occupied by?
AIPAC. Good morning, AIPAC. Thank you, AIPAC. Thank you, AIPAC. Thank you, AIPAC. God bless Israel.
The Zionist lobby that's the most influential in Washington, without question.
Their belief is that being for Israel first means that does not mean you're putting America second.
The Congress of the United States is Israeli-occupied territory.
My father would tell me the most powerful lobby that there is in this country is the Jewish lobby. It's the Israeli lobby.
Well, why would the President of the United States pay attention to that lobby?
They are strong.
Strong in what sense?
They are controlling many things.
When a great power like the United States has conflicting interests with another country, it almost always, except in the case of Israel, acts in terms of its own interests. America first. But when it comes to Israel, it's Israel first.
The question is why? Like, what is that?
I believe there's one simple answer: the Israel lobby.
Israel has an overwhelming lobby over the United States government. We have fought their wars in the Middle East.
I'd like to ask about your father's relationship with Israel. He's taken over $230 million from pro-Israel groups.
You have received $400,000 from AIPAC.
Why can I burn an American flag in my country, but I get a mark by my name if I burn Israel's?
What are you doing to prevent the use of our taxes to starve and kill people in Gaza?
How can somebody pledge allegiance to two countries at the same time?
Do you think it's a conflict of interest for Miriam Adelson, an Israeli donor, to give millions of dollars to his campaign and then Trump have pro-Israeli policies?
And you continue to support Israel. Why? Why do you do that?
The Israeli attack in 1967 on the USS Liberty, which left dozens of American servicemen dead and hundreds wounded.
But there's no reason why we even have to be enemies with Iran. This is Israel's problem. We don't need to be involved in this. Sorry, we got our own issues here.
Our taxpayer dollars can build schools and hospitals in America, not bombs to destroy them in Gaza.
As a Jewish person,
there is no Zionist gene that I have or that Jews have.
And as an American,
over 60% of Jewish Americans believe Israel has committed war crimes. Jewish Americans.
I am horrified by the Israeli government's massacre of well over 65,000 Palestinians in Gaza.
How could it be done to you and your ancestors, and you turn around and you do it to someone else?
Zionism and Zionists hate Jews and Judaism.
Christians, Jews, and Muslims stand shoulder to shoulder against the Zionist empire and the genocide in Gaza.
How are you going to be America first when you're Israel instead? You can't have it both ways.
Charlie was starting to have serious questions about Israel. Not just its role in the Gaza war, but its influence on American politicians.
All of a sudden, Charlie is he's no longer with us and all that. So wait a second, what do you mean? What does with us mean exactly, right? Mm-hmm. I'm an American, okay? Like, I represent this country.
Why are we going to war with Iran?
I don't think we should be fighting wars on behalf of Israel.
Israel forced our hand and dragged us into this war. Again.
You go fight Iran. You go to Israel and fight Hamas. We are American people. It's not our problem.
No one wants to fight for Israel.
Israel is not an ally.
Israel is our top enemy! Enemy! Cut off the goddamn funding!
This is what a real political awakening looks like. America is finally waking up to the foreign political force that hijacked its government and undermined its sovereignty for decades. The Zionist lobby. All indicators, polls, charts, all point in the same direction. This awakening is real, it is growing, and there is no turning back. Since the genocide began, searches for terms like Zionism, AIPAC, Israeli lobby, and Zionist lobby have exploded across the United States. In the last 2 years alone, the Zionist lobby has been exposed as the driving force behind both Iran wars, the genocide, and the crackdown on free speech in the United States. It has been at the center of the implosion of MAGA, Kamala Harris's 2024 loss, the New York City mayoral race, Joe Kent's resignation, and one political firestorm after another. After decades of operating in the shadows, the Zionist lobby was caught red-handed, interfering in, manipulating, and shaping American politics on behalf of a foreign government. And instead of backing off, it went mask off, doubled down, and stepped into broad daylight. That was a fatal move, because millions of Americans finally got to see this foreign influence in action. And the moment that happens, it sets off a chain of natural reactions that may yet end in the complete de-Zionization of the US government. In this video, I want to zoom out and ask, where exactly are we in that de-Zionization process? Why does the Zionist lobby exist in the first place? And what is the one mistake we cannot afford to make if we ever want a real chance to take on this lobby? Welcome to Breezy Politics. For any nation and throughout history, few political questions are more fundamental than sovereignty. Who calls the shots? Because once a nation's sovereignty is compromised, every other political question is affected by it. And in the United States today, nothing compromises that sovereignty or the very idea of government of, by, and for the people, more than the Zionist lobby. That is why this issue provokes such intense reactions across the political spectrum, because it cuts straight to the mother of all political questions. Who truly calls the shots in the most powerful empire in human history? On December 10th, 2025, President Trump said this.
My father would tell me the most powerful lobby that there is in this country is the Jewish lobby. It's the Israeli lobby.
This statement is fascinating. The President of the United States is admitting out loud and on camera that he is aware that the strongest lobby in the country he leads is the lobby of a foreign country. And he knows that because in lobbying, power is measured by one metric: the ability to shape policy. The stronger the lobby is, the more capable it is of bending government policy towards its own interests. And if a lobby can turn a president once known as a comforter-in-chief into Genocide Joe, or turn a president who campaigned on no more wars in the Middle East into the man who started the biggest one yet, that is one hell of a statement of its power. And before we get to why Fred Trump made sure to warn his son Donald about this specific lobby, and why Trump the president shows such deference to it, we must take one step back and ask a more basic question. Why does this foreign lobby exist in the United States in the first place? And to make the explanation more fun, let's break out from this stale political language for a minute and borrow the language of Game of Thrones, okay? Because the more we simplify the picture, the whole thing becomes a lot easier to understand. Think of the world as being divided to 200 houses. Each house has its own flag, its own language, its own beliefs, and above all, its own interests. And instead of House Stark and House Targaryen, you've got House America, House China, House Germany, etc. For the purposes of our story, the two houses that matter most are House America and House Israel. They were born in different times, sit on different continents, speak different languages, and are shaped by different values. So naturally, they would face different challenges, have different enemies, and pursue different interests. And you can see those different interests play out very clearly in what has been happening lately. In March 2026, a poll in House Israel found that 93% of Israelis supported the war with House Iran and see it as a top national priority. Why? Because Iran stands in the way of their national projects. Greater Israel. The idea that occupying Palestine was not the end goal, but only the first step in building a larger Zionist state that expands from the Nile to the Euphrates and dominates the region. The Iranians understood the expansionist nature of the Zionist project a long time ago. In 1983, Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khomeini said, and I quote, "Israel would never abandon its goal of ruling over the countries from the Nile to the Euphrates." Years later, his successor Ayatollah Khamenei, the one who just assassinated in this latest war against Iran, warned of, and I quote, "the economic, political, and geographical expansion of the Zionist regime in the Middle East." That shows how early Iranian leaders understood the expansionist ambitions behind the Zionist project. And for decades, they worked to block it by strengthening the houses that are the closest on Israel's borders. That's why if you looked at the map, you will find that Iran supports the Syrians on the northeast, the Lebanese in the north, and the Palestinians in the south, to contain House Israel and to raise the cost of expansion and eventually to deter it from stealing more land by force. So from the point of view of Israelis who think of expanding their borders as a biblical right, hatred towards the Persians in House Iran make perfect sense, since Iran proved to be the toughest obstacle towards Greater Israel. That's why 93% of Jewish Israelis supported a war of aggression against Iran to get rid of this obstacle. But keep in mind, these are Israeli ambitions, Israeli priorities, and Israeli wars. Now, around that same time, on another continent, in House America, Americans were asked about our national priorities, and a Harvard study from January 2026 came exactly with the answer you'd expect. Americans are concerned with inflation, cost of living, affordability, retirement, immigration, housing. Only 4% mentioned anything related to Israel and its wars. And even after the mainstream media started beating the war drums, the pattern barely changed. Poll after poll showed the same thing. The vast majority of Americans, somewhere between 70 to 80%, opposed going to war with Iran. Now, in a normal world where House America and House Israel each have a government that answers to its own people, the outcome would be obvious. The government of Israel would act on its own people's expansionist ambitions and go to war with Iran. The American government will answer to its people's concerns and tackle the economy, the inflation, the cost of living. That is what government of, by, and for the people looks like. That is what sovereignty looks like. But here is the twist. What if House Israel does not have enough resources to fulfill its people's expansionist ambitions and carry the Zionist project to the next stage? Zionists confronted this problem a long time ago, and their answer was simple. If we already built the Zionist state by stealing other people's land, why not use other people's resources to expand it? If the entire Zionist project is already built on dispossession, then tapping into the resources of the richest house in the system is not a contradiction. It's just the next logical move. So why not reach into the biggest economy in the world, infiltrate its political system, and use it to serve Zionist expansion? But to make that possible, they needed far more than ordinary influence. They needed a full spectrum apparatus, political, financial, and cultural. An entire ecosystem of power that operates across many fronts and in many forms for one overriding purpose: to harness American resources in service of the Zionist project. That apparatus is called the Zionist lobby. Its central function is to make the US government act as an extension of Israeli power, an external arm of the Zionist state. If Israel wanted Iraq, Libya, or Syria crushed, but lacked the resources to do it on its own, the lobby's job is to move Washington to do Israel's dirty work for it. And if 90% of Israelis want war with Iran, while 80% of Americans want nothing to do with this war, then the lobby's job is to override the priorities of the American people and make the US government answer instead to the 93% Israelis who wanted this war. This is the raison d'etre of the Zionist lobby. This is why it exists. Now that we understand why the Zionist lobby exists, the next question is the key one. How does it work? How did this foreign apparatus rise to become, in the president's own words, the most powerful lobby in the United States? Before we talk about how the lobby operates, we need to pin down what exactly are we talking about when we say the Zionist lobby. I think the clearest way to understand this lobby is through functionalism, a framework in political science that helps us identify and categorize actors and institutions by what they do, not by what they call themselves. Not by labels, not by official titles, but by their function in the political system, the interests they advance, and the effects they produce. And once you apply that lens, the map becomes a lot easier to read. Ben Shapiro, Miriam Edelson, Mike Huckabee, and Jared Moskowitz are just as much part of the Zionist lobby as AIPAC, Christians United for Israel, or the ADL. Yes, they occupy different positions. Yes, they speak different tones and operate through different institutions. But at the end of the day, they perform the same function in service of the same goal. The function is to apply pressure on the US political system, and the goal is to keep American resources flowing to Israel. Call it an MOU, call it Epic Fury, or call it Blessing Israel. The branding might differ, but the goal stays the same. Using American resources, which can take many forms, economic, diplomatic, or military, to advance the Zionist project. But how? How did the Zionist lobby become this successful at bending the US government to its will? I want to focus on one element that ties all the lobby's actions together. One element that runs through the whole apparatus, from Ben Shapiro to Christians United for Israel, from Miriam Edelson to AIPAC. And it's this. The Zionist lobby survives by weaponizing your own values against you, your beliefs, your identity, your moral language, your faith, your sense of decency. It takes the things you hold dear and turns them into tools for the Zionist project. And it does that through both a carrot and a stick. The carrot works like this. If you're a liberal, they tell you that Israel is the capital of gay rights and Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. If you are conservative, they tell you Israel is protecting Christian holy sites from the very people who protected those holy sites for centuries. Otherwise, there would have been nothing to protect. Genius. If you are a Christian Zionist, they hand you the Zionist-funded Scofield Bible and tell you that your own salvation depends on blessing this foreign state. If you are a die-hard capitalist, they tell you Israel was our greatest anti-communist ally in the Cold War, even while Jonathan Pollard was caught red-handed, stealing American secrets to sell them to the Soviet Union. If you are a socialist, they point you to the kibbutz and sell it to you as some noble socialist experiment. That's their game. No matter where you stand, politically, culturally, morally, or religiously, the Zionist lobby will try to weaponize your values against you. Your conservatism, your progressivism, or even your centrism, reframing support for Israel as a religious obligation, a democratic duty, or a strategic necessity in order to justify funneling a portion of your resources and use them to expand the Zionist project. Now, that's the carrot, that's the soft side of their power. The stick, however, is something else. Because the moment you say something as simple and as patriotic as American resources should be used to improve American lives, not handed over to some foreign country, the moment you say America first, not Israel first, the punishment comes down, and it comes down hard. And this is where the Zionist lobby becomes different from other lobbies in the United States. Because if you're on the left, for example, and call for gun restriction, okay? Yes, the NRA and the right may come after you, sure. But your political tribe will give you shelter. You will still get airtime on liberal media. Democratic politicians will echo your case. And at the end of the day, you will still have an institutional home. And the reverse is true too. If you're on the right pushing pro-life politics, calling to overturn Roe, or defending the Second Amendment in absolutist terms, the left may come after you, but the right will protect you. Conservative media will platform you. Republican politicians will back you. And again, you will still have an institutional home. But the moment you commit an unforgivable sin, the moment you say that American resources should be used to serve American interests, not Israeli interests, you suddenly find out why did Fred Trump warn his son Donald about the Zionist lobby. It's then and only then. It doesn't matter if you're left or right. It doesn't matter if you're a black progressive woman from St. Louis who's pro-choice like Cori Bush, or a white conservative woman from Georgia who's pro-life like MTG. It doesn't matter if you're a left-wing firebrand like Jamal Bowman, or a libertarian-leaning conservative like Thomas Massie. Your ideology doesn't save you. Your party and your media ecosystem will turn on you. And the same political institutions that were supposed to have your back will line up to destroy you, isolate you, and politically lynch you the moment you come into direct conflict with the Zionist lobby. Because the whole Zionist apparatus works in concert to crush anyone who breaks ranks. If you are Mamdani, you will be knifed in the back by Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, and CNN before Caroline Levitt, Stephen Miller, and Fox News even get their turn smearing you. And if you are Thomas Massie, you will be Ben Shapiro, Ted Cruz, and Fox News stabbing you in the back before Dana Bash and Jake Tapper pile on from CNN. Different camps, same operation. And every one of them will do the lobbyist work the Zionist way, by turning their own camp's moral language into weapons to crush America First voices on both the left and the right. But one might ask, if the lobby is this powerful, why does it panic and react so aggressively to any serious expression of American patriotism? Why does the defamation wing of the Zionist lobby, the ADL, classifies the slogan America First as hate speech? And the answer is this. Because the idea of America First, American sovereignty, this basic principle that the US government should put American interests first in everything it does, this most self-evident principle in politics is at the same time a death sentence for the Zionist lobby. And it's a death sentence precisely because it's self-evident. Because putting your country first in America, France, or China is the natural logic of political life. People identify with that principle instinctively. It is the most basic role of sovereignty. A government only exists to serve the interests of its own people, not a foreign people. That's why I've always thought that if there is one phrase the Zionist lobby fears more than Free Palestine, it is America First. Because while Free Palestine challenges the legitimacy of the Zionist project, America First challenges the legitimacy of the project's very lifeline, the Zionist lobby. And the last thing the Zionist lobby wants is for anyone to question its legitimacy, because he has none. Any actor in American political life, or in any political system for that matter, gets its legitimacy from being an organic outgrowth of that society, rooted in the interest and the values and demands of the people. That is what makes it belong. That is what makes its presence natural and make political sense. But the Zionist lobby in the United States, just like the Zionist state in the Middle East, is not an organic outgrowth of its environment. Both are foreign implants. Neither arose naturally from the political soil in which it currently sits. Both were planted there. They don't belong in that environment. And once something is planted into an environment to which it does not naturally belong, it has only two options if it wants to survive. Crush anyone who questions its place there, or stay hidden, work in the shadows, operate in the dark, and act like you don't exist to avoid the question altogether. Listen to former AIPAC lobbyist Michael Rosenberg explain how the Zionist lobby operates.
I have a somewhat unique perspective on AIPAC owing to the fact that I was employed there for 6 years. Back when I first started AIPAC, Steve Rosen, who was my boss and was later indicted for espionage against the United States. I know, he's still around though. You're allowed to get indicted for espionage. Depends who you're doing it for. He sent me a now famous memo. It's now famous because I gave it to the Washington Post. He warned me not to ever talk, this is my second day there, never to talk about AIPAC activities outside the lobby. He wrote, "A lobby is a night flower. It thrives in the dark and shrivels up in the sunlight."
Now ask yourself this. If the Zionist lobby was just another organic actor in American body politic, why would it go to such lengths to hide what it does? Why would it, in its own terms, thrive in the dark and shrivel in the sunlight? And there is only one answer to this. Because the lobby does not want Americans to see it for what it is. A foreign transplant operating in the United States on behalf of a foreign country. However, in the last 2 years, the lobby made a strategic mistake. The genocide in Gaza triggered a wave of shock and revulsion in the United States that shattered Israel's carefully cultivated image. And as decades of Zionist propaganda began to collapse, the lobby panicked. That panic forced it out of the shadows into broad daylight, where it had to operate openly and aggressively to stop the shift in American public opinion from becoming government policy. And so far, it has largely succeeded. Even as the country has shifted in a far more anti-Israel direction, the lobby has managed to stop our government from reflecting that shift in public opinion. But that success came at a hefty price. The lobby could no longer afford to stay in the shadows. It had to step into the open and openly push Israel-first policies in full view of the American public. The very situation it had spent decades trying to avoid. Because that was always bound to provoke a reaction. And that is exactly what happened. The moment the lobby began pushing Israel-first policies in plain sight, another process began, a natural process. The American body politic began to sense that something was off, that an organ inside it was operating against American interests and against the natural logic of sovereignty. And just like in the human body, once the immune system detects signs of something foreign, it kicks in. It starts investigating. That is exactly what you see in these charts. American body politic began to dig into the lobby, its origins, its methods, and its record. And what fascinates me is how closely the reaction of the body politic mirrors the human body's immune system. Because the first thing an immune system does when it kicks in is distinguishing the self from the non-self. It identifies what is part of the body and serves it, and what is foreign to the body and works against it. And this is exactly what the American body politic has been doing for the last 2 years. Distinguishing the America First self from the Israel First non-self. Distinguishing Dave Smith from Ben Shapiro, Anna Kasparian from Laura Loomer, Thomas Massie from Lindsey Graham, Tucker Carlson from Mark Levin, and the few politicians who still answer to the American people, from those who answer to AIPAC. And out of that first phase, something America First has started to form. Not a coalition yet, not a political front, but a political current with its own language, its own standards, and its own litmus tests. Are you funded by the Zionist lobby or not? Will you push for AIPAC to register as a foreign agent, or will you not? Will you vote to keep sending our money to serve the Zionist project, or will you not? New lines are being drawn in the sand, and that ushers in the second phase of the Zionization process, the inflammation phase. See, once the human immune system identifies the non-self, recognition is only the beginning. It sounds alarms, it calls in reinforcement, it mobilizes cells to contain the foreign body, resist its spread, and limit the damage it can do. That is what produces inflammation. And that, I think, is exactly where we're heading now. The road to the 2026 midterms, and even more so the 2028 presidential elections, will be defined by that inflammatory phase. It's gonna be a vicious fight, generational, intra-party, inter-party, and above all, existential for the Zionist project. Because remember, The lobby is the lifeline of the Zionist project, so you better expect it to play every card at its disposal to suppress our political immune system. And it already has a playbook for this exact moment because it ran the same play in the Middle East for decades. When the Zionist state was planted in the region in 1948, the Middle Eastern political immune system reacted the way any political environment reacts to a foreign implant. It resisted. Naturally, there were wars, there were confrontations, there was constant pushback. And no matter who won or lost on the battlefield, one thing never changed. The region never organically accepted the legitimacy of the Zionist project. It kept reacting against it because it never stopped seeing it for what it is: a foreign implant. So how did the Zionist lobby manage that problem? And I use the word managed, not solved, deliberately, and I'm going to explain why in a second. They managed it by turning American power into a weapon against the Middle East's political immune system. The lobby used American economic, diplomatic, and military force to impose a brutal choice on the region. Play ball, accept Israel's legitimacy, normalize relations, and get rewarded with American money, weapons, and protection like Egypt, Jordan, and the UAE. Or keep resisting and risk the fate of Iraq, Syria, Libya, Lebanon, and Iran. Isolation, destabilization, and ultimately destruction. That has forced many governments in the region to override the instincts of their people, suppress the immune reaction, and manufacture acceptance for a foreign implant the region never accepted on its own. And the reason I say managed, not solved, is because we are still being forced to bankroll this arrangement every single year. Take Egypt, for example. When President Carter brokered Camp David in 1978, peace treaty between Egypt and Israel, he understood full well that for the Egyptian government, peace with Israel meant overriding the deeper rejection of the Zionist state among the Egyptian people. That's why from that year on, American taxpayers have been pouring billions of dollars into Egypt to incentivize and help the Egyptian government override their people's rejection of the Zionist project and prevent that rejection from becoming state policy. Same thing with Jordan after the 1994 treaty, and same thing with many other countries in the region. The problem was never solved. We are still paying billions of dollars every single year just to manage it. Look at the aid chart for Egypt. Notice the difference between the green, the blue, and the red dots? The green dots show the aid Egypt received when it was still in the Soviet orbit. Basically nothing. The blue dots show the aid Egypt received once it moved into the American orbit. When the US interests were at stake, that's the blue dots. But the red dots, that's where it gets interesting. Those dots show what happens when Israel's interests are on the line. The moment Egypt was pushed in 1978 to sign a treaty recognizing Israel's existence, US aid to Egypt shot through the roof to reward the Egyptian government for overriding the deeper rejection among the Egyptian people towards Israel and to help suppress that political immune response over the long term. And you see the same pattern with Jordan. The blue dots show what we gave Jordan when the issue at hand was US interests. The red dots show what happens when Israel's interests get into the picture. Once Jordan signed its peace treaty with Israel in 1994, US aid jumps. See this spike here in 1995? That is a signing bonus in the shape of forgiving loans. Then the flow of money increases as the arrangement holds. In other words, the Zionist lobby used American power in the same way again, as a tool to buy and enforce acceptance of Israel in a political environment that would have never accepted it organically. That's why I've always believed that cutting aid to Egypt, for example, may be even more dangerous to the Zionist project, to Israel, than cutting aid to Israel itself. Now, bringing it back home, I think the tactics the Zionist lobby used to manage the Middle East crisis so far is exactly the blueprint it's trying to apply here in the United States. The lobby is trying to manage the crisis it's currently facing by weaponizing our own government and our own institutions to suppress the American political immune system by undermining the very tools and mechanisms that led to this awakening in the first place, like free speech, academic freedom, social media, etc. And the Zionist lobby has everything it needs to keep this operation running: money, influence, organization, and reach into every major lever of power. I mean, literally, Netanyahu was set in front of President Trump in the Situation Room to push Trump to go to war against Iran. But I still think the lobby's most effective weapon, as I said before, is weaponizing our own values. And why do I insist on making this point? If you've been paying attention over the last 2 years, you may have noticed a revealing pattern in how the Zionist lobby goes after the figures who helped lead this American awakening on both the left and the right. And there is one type of people the Zionist lobby goes after with a special kind of venom and obsession. One type they move hardest to smear, isolate, and destroy. The people they fear most are the ones who choose country over party. The ones willing to cross the aisle and work with fellow Americans they may disagree with on 10 other political issues, but who can still put those differences aside to work on the political question that matters the most: American sovereignty. People like Tucker Carlson, Anna Kasparian, Thomas Massie, Ro Khanna, MTG, Cenk Uygur, Dave Smith, Candace Owens, Glenn Greenwald, the whole crew at Breaking Point, etc., etc., etc. These figures represent the biggest danger to the lobby for two main reasons. First, because they understand something the lobby cannot afford to let spread. If Lindsey Graham and Chuck Schumer can bury their differences when it is time to serve the Zionist lobby, then Americans can bury theirs when it is time to fight for American sovereignty. Second, when two people with very different political, social, and economic beliefs are still willing to put those differences aside to work on this one issue, it tells the lobby something alarming. These people understand the gravity of the threat posed by the Zionist lobby, and that raises red flags immediately. Because this is one of the clearest metrics the Zionist apparatus uses to measure how deeply somebody understands the nature of the threat posed by the Zionist lobby. If you criticize the lobby but remain trapped in left-right tribalism, still unwilling to cross the aisle and work with the other side on this issue, then the lobby knows one or two things is true. Either you do not fully grasp the gravity of the problem at hand, or you still see your partisan divides with the other side as more important than the question of sovereignty. And that is a situation the lobby can manage all day long, because it knows that when push comes to shove, you will fall back in line. You will vote for the so-called lesser of two evils, and somehow, almost every time, that lesser evil just happens to be the same candidate the lobby already picked for your own side. Luckily, over the last 2 years, we have seen more and more people from the left and the right cross the aisle and work with each other on this issue. And the people who led the way deserve real credit. They helped break the spell. They showed that on the question of sovereignty, coalition is possible. And that spirit must grow. Because if we're ever gonna defeat the Zionist lobby, we will have to out-pragmatize it. Look at the numbers. By April 2025, AIPAC had funded the campaigns of 331 members of the House, Republicans and Democrats alike. And that's just one organization within the apparatus. The lobby did not Zionize the government by staying trapped in one partisan lane. It did it by building a cross-party machine. So if we are serious about de-Zionizing the government, we will have to learn from the one thing the lobby understands very well: country over party. They built a bipartisan machine to Zionize the government. We will need a bipartisan movement to de-Zionize it.